Hello, this video was prepared for the Civil Air Patrol Level 5 module on preparing to serve on region or national staff. Whether you watch it for that class or for some other reason, I hope it helps you to understand how Civil Air Patrol works and the role of the staff member. The things I'm talking about really apply at all levels of staff work, from the squadron on up, but the expectations of staff aren't really spelled out in other settings too well. So I am Colonel Michael Merrick. I'm the 30th Commander of South Dakota Wing, and I've had staff positions for 13 past wing commanders. I've also served on North Central Region staff twice under 3 region commanders, and in a national volunteer staff position from 2005 to 2018. I received 2 Distinguished Service Award decorations for my national staff work. It's an award that's rare for any member who's not been a wing commander. I'm telling you this not to brag, but to show that I do have background in staff work at the higher levels of Civil Air Patrol. The higher you go in CAP, the more important is planning, coordination, and situational awareness. Region and national staff particularly are critical to mission accomplishment and implementing policy at all levels. The staff member has no direct authority, and that's important. The staff member works with authority delegated from the commander, and that includes interpreting policy, providing guidance and support to subordinates, particularly to wing subordinate units, and advising and supporting superiors. And the staff member accomplishes the mission, but remember, it's by delegated authority. There needs to be transactions between the leader and the subordinate, the staff member. Sometimes that is driven by the commander, but maybe more often the transaction starts with the staff member bringing something to the commander's attention. When it works, there's a clear understanding of how the delegated authority is employed. When it's not working, there's a disconnect that just doesn't benefit the organization. Staff members generally do not act directly without coordination. When it's something in their lane, we don't have to coordinate every detail, but it's often beneficial to keep superiors and colleagues informed. Responsibilities of staff members go both upward and downward. Going downward, you as a staff member look into things going on in the organization. That's a minimum part of your job. You're monitoring, observing, guiding, and encouraging subordinates and colleagues. And you reach in when necessary. You watch for things that need correction, and you make recommendations about them. Sometimes those staff members overreach. They go too far without coordination first, acting without coordination. But the other responsibility of a staff member is upwards. You need to speak your mind, but then accept the decision of the boss. And if the decision doesn't quite go the way you want, you have to move forward, even still embracing the decision. You may not agree with the boss's decision, but you should support it nevertheless, as if it were your idea, because it is the boss who has the authority to make that decision. And note that your boss probably has the same expectations from the next higher level of command. You are selected to serve on the staff in a staff position because you have demonstrated expertise. Commanders kind of need to be generalists. They need to know some about pretty much everything that's going on, but they depend on you for your deeper knowledge about the particular assignment you have. You are not an independent operator, but you work to implement the commander's intent, to fulfill policy, and to accomplish the missions of CAP. You do what you do because the commander, who has the authority, does not have the time or the expertise to do everything, and that's your role as staff. Staff positions have job descriptions in CAPP 30-1 that describe how you assist, oversee, analyze, and support the mission. And of course, commanders may give you specific assignments, but you need to understand what things you can simply do and understand what you cannot operate independently on. What you do, there will be some projects you just do hands-on, but you'll also be advising wings how to succeed within current guidance. You'll watch for developing issues to take to command, ideally with recommendations as to how to proceed. And then there's a thing called formal completed staff work, which probably requires written reports or written analysis and recommendations. Again, you need to understand where you need to coordinate and provide situational awareness and where you cannot operate independently. In short, you need to know your job, but you need to have situational awareness about other people's jobs and know where they might overlap. So I talked about those two things, coordination and situational awareness. Coordination means that even when things are in your lane as a staff position, superiors need to know what's going on. Now, for routine updates, that's typically in staff meetings, maybe quick messages, that sort of thing. But in unusual circumstances or when there are problems or even crises, you need to make sure your superior hears about it from you, not somebody else, so there are no surprises. Your superior may want to see drafts of your reply to a question or your proposed response and action when there's a problem. That's not every routine thing, but when there's something big and important and a critical issue. Your superior may want input from other advisors before approval. And in extreme cases, your boss may need to coordinate upwards to your boss's boss. Remember that in all of these things, you're acting on behalf of the commander. You're not acting independently as your own. So the other term was situational awareness. And yes, there are things that are in your lane, but usually things are not exclusively in your lane. Often there are things that other staff members need to be aware of. They should know about, number one, to avoid working at cross purposes, but also so that different staff members who may be asked something related to the issue can tell a consistent story. So we're all on the same page, you might say. So we have to think critically about who is affected, who in terms of other staff people, who's affected, and who needs to be in the know ahead of the curve. Of course, one way we do that when it's relatively routine is email. In my rule of thumb for email is if my address is in the to line of the email, it means someone's expecting a reply from me. And when that happens, we need to do our best to be prompt about it. If my email address is in the CC line of the email, that means it's an FYI and it's something that the sender thinks I should be aware of, but I'm not necessarily expected to reply. And if it happens that I'm in the BCC field, it means essentially the sender is saying, you need to know about this, but don't tell people I BCC'd you. So just thinking about who needs to be in the loop, who needs to know about this ahead of time, and keeping there. In CAP, we can't be cowboys. Now, there is a time and a place for single focused action, maybe in an extreme emergency that needs what you might call a cowboy response, the instant uncoordinated action. But a true cowboy, and I'm using that term to refer to both male and female, a true cowboy practices stewardship, takes care of the cattle and the land, is proactive, not reactive, trained and educated and experienced, and yes, action-oriented, but within an ensemble cast. So understanding that many people are involved, not just one person. So in CAP, stewardship does mean mission accomplishment, but it also means wise use of our resources, and people are resources who we need to respect, coordinate with, and make it a team effort. Here's another thing that is not very well described in the information that senior members receive in Civil Air Patrol. But in a way, there are two chains of command in CAP, depending on the circumstances. And staff work happens in both of them. In this slide, the national and region staff is on the left side, supporting the commander to commander process. So we're talking about operational control versus administrative control. On operational missions, we're not going from commander to commander. As you note on the slide here, the incident commander reports to the NOC or AFRCC or the customer, and the mission staff reports and makes recommendations to the incident commander. That's different from how it works when we talk about the path that is in blue, administrative control rather than operational control. So today we are talking about those elements that are in the blue path here, and how the question of how the staff works for the commander. Here's a chart I created to try to show you what this process is like. You have the Board of Governors, who sets policy and works interactively with the national commander. And of course, going down the organization, the national commander supervises the region commanders, who supervise wing commanders, group commanders, if your wing has them, and squadron commanders. But for each commander, off to the side is the staff. And the staff members at each level talk to each other. They coordinate back and forth. And as appropriate, they take direction from their respective commander, or they provide feedback and information to their respective commander. Now, in reality, there are some situations where the national staff might end up talking to the squadron staff, but mainly the interaction among levels of staff is national staff to region staff to wing staff. At each level, the staff is, in some cases, doing some things directly, but is watching, is evaluating, is making recommendations, and that works up and down the staff column. But at each level, when there are problems or when there are things that need wider coordination, they go to command or to other staff members. Here's a graphic that kind of shows how we need to respond as staff members, because usually the decision is not ours. We make recommendations, we make our voice heard, but then it is the commander, or sometimes the next level above the commander, or more than one level above the commander, that actually makes the decision. And we have to figure out where we fit in with that, what level of consensus we can have. And, ideally, your recommendations will be approved and adopted, and things will be happy. But sometimes the commander needs to modify things, or takes a mix of input from different staff members. Well, in that case, again, it's okay. I like it. It's not exactly what I had in mind, but this is going to work. We can thrive here. But sometimes you just don't like what the decision is. And so then we have to decide what happens. You can suck it up and just keep going, survive there, and say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, we'll make it work. If you dislike it enough, if you hate it, you just can't live with it, well, either you need a big attitude adjustment, or maybe you need to leave the staff position because it's not working for you and you're not working for the commander and the organization. So this is kind of the range from a perfect solution to one that you just can't live with, and how you respond. Just some final thoughts here. Staff work is essential to effective management in CAP. The higher you go up the ladder in CAP, the more important it is to do the planning and the coordination and the situational awareness. Good staff members are proactive and engaged, but they don't act independently. They use good judgment and critical thinking to understand all of the, you might call them, touch points among the different staff members who need to be involved or be knowledgeable. They communicate effectively with all the relevant parties, and their primary purpose is to support command and policy. Now, I know that some people just want to do what they think is needed. They think that all this coordination and situational awareness just bogs down the process. They might have what you call a goal orientation. They identify a goal and they charge full speed ahead to accomplishment, kind of a frontal assault type thing. But CAP is a chain of command organization. We don't work in isolation. That means knowing your lane as a staff member, doing good work in your lane, and including others anytime something happens that has implications outside your lane. So whoever is next up the chain of command from you doesn't get surprised. And so that we find the best way to accomplish a mission, not just the first idea that comes up. So those are my thoughts about preparing to serve, serving and preparing to serve as a staff member at the region or national level. But as I said at the beginning, I think this also applies at the wing level and the squadron level. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you found some value in the way I've presented this information.